I lent my brother money to help him out. Then he bought a new car instead. My brother was struggling, or at least that's what he told me. He came to me with a desperate voice saying he was behind on bills, that he just needed a little help to get back on his feet. I didn't hesitate. I gave him the money, trusting that he would use it for what he said he needed. And then, I saw him driving a brand new car. I stood there, watching him pull into the driveway like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't just begged me for money a week ago. "Nice car," I said, my voice tight. He grinned. "Yeah, man, I needed an upgrade." "With what money?" I asked, crossing my arms. He laughed. "Relax, it's not a big deal. I'll pay you back eventually." Eventually? Like my money wasn't even real to him, like he hadn't just lied to my face about needing help. He thought I'd just let it go. He thought he could keep using me, but if he thought there wouldn't be consequences for taking my generosity for granted, he was in for a rude awakening. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. When my brother called me, I could hear the desperation in his voice. He told me he was in a bad place financially, that he was behind on bills, that he was barely keeping things together. He said he just needed a little help, just enough to cover his rent and utilities until he could get back on his feet. I didn't even think twice. He was my brother, and family helps family, right? So I transferred the money to him that same day, a few $1,000s, trusting that he would use it responsibly. A week later, I found out the truth. I was coming home from work when I saw a sleek brand new car parked in my brother's driveway. At first I thought maybe it was a rental. Maybe he had borrowed it from a friend. But then I saw him walk out, keys in hand, grinning like he had just hit the jackpot. My stomach sank. I waited for him to notice me, and when he did, he waved casually, like this was just any other day. "Nice car," I said, forcing my voice to stay neutral. He grinned wider, completely oblivious to the anger boiling under my skin. "Yeah, man, I needed an upgrade. My old one was giving me problems." "With what money?" I asked, keeping my tone even. He hesitated for a second, then shrugged. "Don't worry about it. I had some extra cash come in, so I figured I'd treat myself." "Extra cash?" I felt my fists clench. "You mean the money I gave you to pay your bills?" His expression flickered, just for a second, before he brushed it off with a laugh. "Relax, it's not a big deal. I'll pay you back eventually." Eventually, like it was chump change. Like the money I had given him, money I had worked hard for, meant nothing to him. I took a slow breath, trying to control my temper. "You told me you needed that money to survive, that you were struggling." He had the audacity to roll his eyes. "Dude, I was struggling, but I needed a reliable car too. It's an investment." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. An investment? He had straight up lied to my face, taken my money, and used it to buy himself a shiny new toy. He thought I'd just let it go. He thought I'd be too nice to do anything about it. But if he thought he could just steal from me and walk away without consequences, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I stood there, staring at my brother, waiting for him to say something, anything that would make this make sense. But all I got was that smug, careless attitude he always had when he thought he could talk his way out of something. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even trying to hide what he had done. "You needed that money for rent," I said, my voice dangerously calm. He shrugged like it was nothing. "I had other ways to cover rent. Besides, what's the big deal? You're doing fine, and I'll pay you back eventually." That word again. Eventually. Like my money wasn't even real to him. Like I was his personal bank, and all he had to do was ask, and I'd just hand over whatever he wanted. I clenched my jaw. "You lied to me, man. You made it sound like you were drowning, like you had no way to survive. And the second you got that money, you blew it on a car?" He sighed, acting like I was the one being dramatic. "Come on, it's not like I wasted it. I needed a car." "No, you needed a roof over your head. You needed food. You needed to not be calling me, begging for help like your life depended on it. You made it sound like you had no other options, and now you're standing here with a brand new car like everything's fine." He crossed his arms. "I don't get why you're so pissed. You have way more money than I do. It's not like this hurt you." That was it. That was the moment I knew he was beyond saving. He didn't feel bad. He didn't even see this as a betrayal. He thought it was his right to take from me. "So what? Because I have more money than you, that means I have to hand it over whenever you feel like it." He actually had the nerve to laugh. "Dude, calm down. It's just money. I'll get it back to you." "Yeah?" I said, stepping closer. "How?" "You already spent it, and don't even try to tell me you'll pay me back, because we both know that's never happening." His face twisted with irritation. He hated when I called him out. Hated when I didn't just give in and let him do whatever he wanted. "I don't need this attitude right now," he muttered, shaking his head. "No, what you need is a reality check," he scoffed. "Oh, and you're going to be the one to give it to me? Damn right I am." He thought this was over. He thought he had gotten away with it. But if he thought I was just going to let him steal from me and keep living like nothing happened, he was in for a rude awakening. I walked away before I did something I'd regret. My hands were clenched so tight my nails were digging into my palms, and my jaw ached from how hard I was grinding my teeth. My own brother had stolen from me without a second thought, and now he was acting like I was the problem. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't even pretending to care that he had just lied to my face and used my money to fund his new car. That's when I realized he was never going to change. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This was a pattern. He had spent years talking his way out of trouble, years leaning on other people to bail him out, years getting away with it. And now, he thought I was just another sucker he could use whenever he needed something. Well, that ended today. I gave him one last look, my voice calm but firm. "You have a week to pay me back." He laughed, actually laughed. "Or what? You gonna sue me?" I smirked. "Number. But I'm going to make sure you regret it." And then I left. He thought I was bluffing. He thought I'd just get over it. But he had no idea that I was already 3 steps ahead. First, I called our parents. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told them exactly what he had done, how he had manipulated me into thinking he was struggling, only to blow every cent on a new car. Mom was horrified. Dad was furious. And the best part, they had been helping him too. He had played everyone. Then I contacted the dealership. I knew he had bad credit. There was no way he had fully paid for that car. So I made a little phone call, pretending to be an interested buyer, and asked about the financing options for the exact model he had just purchased. Turns out, he barely made the down payment. He was on a ridiculously high-interest loan, and if he missed a single payment, that car was gone. I smiled. Perfect. Finally, I decided to hit him where it really hurt, his social life. He had spent years pretending to be the guy who had everything together. The guy with the best gadgets, the best car, the best lifestyle, all built on lies. So I started letting his friends know the truth. Casually, of course. A little, "Oh, did you hear about what he pulled?" Here, a little, "Yeah, I covered him for months and he never paid me back there." It spread like wildfire. Within days, his entire image was cracking. And my brother? He was finally starting to realize he had messed with the wrong person. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. My parents were furious when they realized my brother had played them, just like he played me. They had been helping him with money for months, thinking he was struggling, only to find out he had blown everything on a new car. I could hear the rage in my dad's voice when he called me. "I can't believe he did this. We gave him money too. He told us he was behind on rent. He told us he couldn't afford groceries." I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying "I told you so." My mom, on the other hand, was in full guilt trip mode. Maybe he just made a mistake. Maybe he thought he could handle the payments. I wasn't having it. "Mom, he knew exactly what he was doing. He's been doing it for years. He doesn't care who he hurts as long as he gets what he wants." Meanwhile, my brother was completely oblivious to the fact that I had already set things in motion that were about to ruin the little fantasy world he had built for himself. His friends started hearing about what he did. The same people he had been trying to impress with his new lifestyle were now finding out that he was just a liar who mooched off his own family. His reputation? Shattered. And the dealership? That was the best part. I had been right. He barely made the down payment. He had financed the car with insanely high interest, thinking he could figure it out later. When I found that out, I did the simplest thing in the world. I waited. I knew my brother. I knew he wasn't responsible enough to make those payments on time. And sure enough, he missed his first one. Within a week, the repo guys came for his car. The moment I heard about it, I had to stop myself from laughing. All that gloating, all that arrogance about his brand new ride, and now, it was gone. He called me, panicked, furious. "Dude, they took my car. What the hell? I was going to make the payment next week. I didn't even try to hide my amusement." "Oh? I thought it was an investment?" His voice was full of frustration. "You did this, didn't you?" I smirked. "No, you did this. You took money that wasn't yours, you lied to everyone around you, and you thought there wouldn't be consequences. Guess you were wrong." Silence. Then he muttered, "This is messed up, man." I chuckled. "No, what's messed up is you thinking you could use me and get away with it." He tried to argue, tried to tell me I was ruining his life, but I wasn't listening anymore. He had spent years getting away with using people, and now he was finally paying the price. And I wasn't done yet. My brother had always believed he was untouchable. He thought he could lie, manipulate, and take advantage of people without ever facing consequences. But now, he was watching everything crumble around him. His car was gone, his reputation was in shambles, and our parents were no longer willing to support him after realizing how badly he had used them. And yet, instead of apologizing, instead of owning up to what he had done, he doubled down. I started getting calls from family members, cousins, aunts, even an uncle I hadn't talked to in years. They all wanted to know the same thing. "Did you really have his car taken away?" I laughed every time. "No, I didn't. The bank did. He didn't pay for it." But of course my brother had spun the story differently. He made it sound like I had personally made sure the car was repossessed, like I had gone out of my way to ruin his life. He painted himself as the victim, as the poor guy who just wanted a little help but was betrayed by his own family. I let him talk. Because the truth, it didn't need defending. People started seeing through his lies on their own. The more they asked questions, the more they realized that his stories didn't add up. Wait, didn't he tell me he needed money for rent? Hold on, he told me it was for a medical bill. He said he was saving up for school. What the hell? It turned out he had scammed more people than just me. Money from family members, borrowed under different excuses, all leading back to that car, the one that was now gone. And the best part? He was still pretending everything was fine. I saw him post on social media like nothing had happened. No mention of the repossession, no hint that his world was falling apart. Just a picture of him out at a bar with friends, a forced smile on his face, trying to act like he still had control. But I knew the truth. He was barely holding it together. A few days later, I got another call from him. He sounded exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "Look, man, I know things got messy, but can we just talk?" I leaned back in my chair, completely unfazed. "Talk about what?" He sighed. "I don't know, just fix things. I don't want this to get worse." I smirked. "Oh, so now you care about things getting worse? Where was this concern when you were lying to my face and stealing from me?" Silence. "I didn't steal from you," he muttered weakly. I shook my head. "That's exactly what you did, and you didn't care until it blew up in your face." He tried to argue, but he had nothing left. No more excuses, no more sob stories, no more manipulations. For the first time in his life, he had to deal with the mess he created. And I was done cleaning up after him. I let the silence hang between us, giving him a chance to say something, anything that would make me believe he actually regretted what he had done. But all I got was a long, tired sigh, like he was the one who had been wronged, like I was supposed to feel bad for him because his lies had finally caught up to him. I wasn't falling for it. "You have no idea how hard this has been for me," he finally muttered. I scoffed. "Oh yeah? Must be real hard lying to everyone around you, stealing money, and then getting caught. Sounds exhausting." "Come on, man, it's not like that," he said quickly, but I cut him off. "Then what is it like? Because from where I'm standing, you played the victim, manipulated everyone into feeling sorry for you, took money that wasn't yours, and spent it on a damn car instead of paying your bills. What part of that am I getting wrong?" Silence. "I don't know what you want me to say," he finally muttered. I shook my head. "I don't want you to say anything. I wanted you to be better, but it's too late for that." He sighed again. "So, what, you're just done with me?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I do know one thing. You're not getting another dime from me." That was when he dropped the real bomb. "So, you're just like mom and dad now? You're gonna cut me off too?" And there it was. The same manipulation, the same guilt trip he had used 100 times before. He thought if he made me feel bad enough, I'd cave, that I'd suddenly forget everything he had done just because he was finally facing consequences. But I wasn't falling for it, not this time. "No," I said simply. "I'm not cutting you off. You did that to yourself." He didn't have a response, because he knew I was right. For years he had relied on his family to clean up his messes, to cover for him when he screwed up, to hand him whatever he wanted without asking for anything in return. And now he had burned through all of it. He had taken from everyone who cared about him, and he had done it without a second thought. "I don't know what you expect me to do, man," he finally muttered. "Figure it out," I said coldly, "like the rest of us do." And with that, I hung up, because for the first time in his life, he was going to have to stand on his own. And for the first time in mine, I didn't feel responsible for saving him. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, waiting to feel guilty, waiting for that familiar feeling of obligation to creep back in, the one that had always made me feel like I had to fix things for my brother, that I had to be the responsible one because no one else would. But it never came. I felt nothing. No regret, no doubt. No second guessing. Just a sense of finality. Like I had finally broken free from a weight I had been carrying for years. My brother had never taken responsibility for anything. He had coasted through life believing that someone else would always be there to clean up his mess. And for a long time, he was right. I had always been the one to bail him out, to cover for him when he made bad choices, to lend him money I knew I would never see again. But that version of me, that person didn't exist anymore. And I think he finally realized it too. The texts stopped, the calls stopped. He didn't even try to send some half-hearted apology or a promise to make things right, because he knew there was nothing he could say that would undo what he had done. He had played his last card, and now he was completely on his own. A few weeks passed, and word started getting around that things were getting bad for him. He was struggling to make rent after blowing his savings on that car. Without a car, he had trouble getting to work, and without work, his financial situation got even worse. He had gone from bragging about his new lifestyle to barely scraping by, and the people he used to impress, they weren't impressed anymore. I heard through family that he had tried going back to my parents for help, but they had already seen the truth. They weren't willing to hand over another dime after realizing how he had lied to them. He had spent years manipulating everyone around him, and now that no one was falling for it anymore, he had nothing left. I thought maybe he would try reaching out again, that he would try one last time to guilt me into saving him, but he didn't. Because deep down, he knew he had burned that bridge for good. And me, I had never felt lighter. Weeks passed, and my brother's perfect little world completely fell apart. He went from bragging about his new car to having nothing. The same friends he had been trying to impress, they stopped answering his calls. The people who used to hype him up when he posted about his big upgrade were now nowhere to be found. Because once the money was gone, so was their interest in him. He was struggling, badly. I heard from a cousin that he had moved out of his apartment because he couldn't afford rent. The guy who had once laughed in my face and told me to relax about the money he owed me was now couch surfing with friends because he had burned every bridge with family. No one was willing to help him anymore. And yet, he still hadn't reached out to apologize. That was the part that really solidified things for me. He could have called me. He could have admitted he screwed up, could have taken responsibility for once in his life. But he didn't. Instead, he was telling people that I had turned my back on him in his time of need, that I had ruined him by telling our parents what he did. That was all I needed to hear to know that I had made the right decision, because even after everything, he still refused to take the blame. And honestly, I was done thinking about it. I had spent too much of my life trying to fix things for him, trying to believe he would change. But now, for the first time, I realized that he was never going to change, and that was no longer my problem. I wasn't going to waste another second worrying about someone who had never once worried about me. And as I went back to living my life, without him dragging me down, I finally understood what real freedom felt like. I didn't hear from my brother for months after that. No calls, no texts, no desperate attempts to make amends. It was almost like he had just vanished, and honestly, I didn't care. I had spent so long trying to keep him afloat, being the responsible one while he burned through every dollar he could get his hands on. And now that I had finally let go, I realized just how much lighter my life felt without him in it. But then, out of nowhere, he showed up. It was late, almost midnight, when I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I looked through the peephole, there he was. My brother, looking nothing like the cocky, arrogant guy who had once laughed in my face about spending my money on his car. He looked exhausted, worn down, and completely out of options. I didn't want to open the door, but a part of me, the part that still remembered the kid I grew up with before he turned into a selfish liar, wanted to hear what he had to say. So I opened it. He stood there for a second, like he wasn't sure if I was actually going to let him in. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and for the first time in his life, he looked embarrassed. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now," he said, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. I crossed my arms. "You're not wrong." He swallowed hard. "Look, I messed up, I know that, and I get why you don't want anything to do with me, but I need help." I almost laughed. Of course he did. That was the only reason he ever reached out, to take. "Let me guess," I said. "You're broke, homeless, and now you're hoping I'll bail you out again." He winced. "I'm not asking for money." That was a shock. "Then what are you asking for?" He sighed. "I don't know. I need a fresh start. I need to get back on my feet, and I don't have anyone else to turn to." I stared at him, waiting for the apology that never came. No acknowledgement of how he had used me. No admission that he had lied to everyone who cared about him. Just another plea for help. "So, you need a fresh start," I repeated. "And you came to me? After everything?" He nodded. I let the silence stretch between us before finally saying the words I should have said a long time ago. "Figure it out." His eyes widened. "What?" "Figure it out," I repeated. "You're a grown man. You made this mess. It's not my job to clean it up for you." His face twisted in frustration. "So that's it? You're just going to throw me away like everyone else?" I shook my head. "Number you threw yourself away, and I'm done paying the price for it." And then I closed the door. For the first time, I wasn't cleaning up after him. I wasn't making excuses for him. I was finally free. I stood there for a moment after closing the door, half expecting him to start pounding on it, shouting, demanding that I listen, that I let him in, that I fix things for him one more time. But he didn't. After a few seconds, I heard the sound of footsteps shuffling away, then silence. I didn't open the door to check. I didn't watch him leave. I just stood there, letting the weight of everything settle over me. For years, I had been his safety net. I had been the one he came to whenever he needed help, whenever he screwed up so badly that there was no one left to save him. And every time, I had given in, thinking that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different, that he would finally learn, that he would finally grow up. But he never did, because he never had to. I walked back to my couch and sat down, staring at my phone, half expecting a text from him, some last attempt to guilt me into changing my mind, but nothing came. Maybe he finally understood that I meant it this time. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he realized he was truly on his own, and I felt relief. I had spent so much time thinking that it was my responsibility to help him, that if I didn't, no one else would, that I was somehow obligated to keep picking up the pieces of his bad decisions. But now I saw things clearly. I wasn't the bad guy for walking away. I wasn't heartless. I was just done being used. A few weeks passed, and I didn't hear from him. I heard from family that he was struggling, bouncing from place to place, trying to find work, trying to convince someone else to save him. But no one was biting anymore. Everyone had seen through him. He had run out of people to manipulate. And honestly, that wasn't my problem anymore. One day I drove past a dealership and saw a car that looked just like the one he had bought with my money. I smiled to myself, remembering how he had stood in front of his new ride, so sure he had won, so sure he had gotten away with everything. And now, that car was long gone. The money was gone, and he had nothing left. He had spent his whole life using people, burning bridges, thinking he would never have to face the consequences. But now he was learning the hard way that eventually the bill always comes due. And I was finally free. Some people will take as much as you let them. And when you finally say no, they'll call you the bad guy. But the truth is, you're not. Walking away from people who use you isn't cruelty. It's self-respect. Now, let me ask you, have you ever had to cut someone off because they took advantage of you? How did it turn out? Drop your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.